started. Can everybody hear me? Yep, okay. The people in the back, Mary, can you hear me? Yep, okay. I'm Orlo Stitt, and we're here. There's 6 of us that are going to be speaking one way or another. And did everybody get a packet, a little packet with an idea trap? I might explain to get things started what an idea trap is. An idea trap is that little pad. And in this age of computers and voicemail and all the rest of the things that are convenient, if I put my idea trap by my bed, I'm the kind that can't go back to sleep until I've written it down. And it's inconvenient to break up my computer or even my phone and start making notes. So I just write, send information to John Jones, and then I can go back to sleep or whatever it is. I might even write for a few minutes, but sometimes it's a saver. But you can put it in your purse if you're a lady, or your shirt pocket or whatever. And amazing, it's so convenient. And if you want more after that one runs out, why, we'll fix you up. Yep. So welcome. We have nearly a full house. The capacity is 75 in the room, and we're right at that. So holistically green living education. We're really in the education business, but we're not in business. This is definitely a volunteer group, very informed and educated. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history, and while people are still coming in, 1 year ago, to the hour, to the minute, 365 days, Michelle Housel, who's with us, and I gave a similar presentation. And our little group has grown now, and we're expanding, and our audience, all of y'all, are increased also, and the technology's changed. So we're really looking after what's happening, keeping up to date. Then Kelly and I somehow communicated. Kelly's the one that's been helping us with the library. And she said, well, would you like to speak for another session? And I said, well, that'd be fine. When are you thinking? She says, well, you spoke on the 14th of September last year. Would you like to do that again? I said, that sounds good. So here we are. So she's not in the room. Thanks to Kelly, everything from the computer and the tech, microphones and all, she has been working with us to set up in a way that's helpful. And so this hopefully will be our annual climate change program, and we'll have it again next year. But we're going to talk about some things that we're going to do in the meantime to provide further education, because I think we all agree, most of us here, that education and climate change is a topic which we need to do more promoting and understanding and research and everything. Moving on, you have a flyer of all the people's information, and the theme of the program tonight is education, motivation, emotions related to climate change and combating climate change. There are things that we can do that are not inconvenience, and my wife and I would agree that it actually is, a lot of people won't believe this, a better life, healthier life, and so forth. So we want to convey some of the things that benefit us by reducing carbon pollution to assure a wholesome life. And not only for me, at my age, I'll probably try to drift through, and it'll be up to particularly the high school kids that are here to carry the next generation and to do what has to be done. We're going to talk about conservation, uh, Sarah particularly in relationship to green forests and watershed, and I'll let her talk about all that. Greater efficiencies, whether it's a heat pump water heater or an induction cooktop or a electric car or a mini split in your house instead of that central system with runs ducts all through your house. And then clean energy generation, mainly focused on solar. I think that solar, somewhat like COVID, solar is the vaccine that will combat climate change. But we need to do things first to make it more affordable to do it with solar. And there are also some breakthroughs in the financing of solar, so people, even with a poor credit score, can be a part of the solar movement. So these are the people here that are going to talk. Like I said before, each person here is volunteering. We're not being paid. They're doing it because they're committed to climate change as a challenge, as something that is responsible and something that's good to do. We have a wide variety of knowledge and experience, and we hope that you find the information meaningful and motivating. The combined credentials of these people down here, this row here, is awesome. It's amazing, and working with them to put this together and to be here for you to hear tonight is a definite pleasure and a opportunity and for all of us. What? So, given that list of long credentials and so forth, I would like to suggest that that you have time, and what I'm going to suggest is that we take a few minutes of complete silence and just, first of all, think about what, I'm going to go back there, think about what is in their credentials and what may click, but also in your own way, your own thinking, write it in your idea trap, what you'd really like to learn and understand better, something that you can do, questions and answers that allow you to be a part of the movement. Think or even meditate, pray, whatever you want to do with a few minutes of silence. So let's just be real quiet now for about 2 or 3 minutes, and we'll let everybody think about what I just said. Take you a lot more, but knowing who's speaking and what something about them. Also look through your packet and you'll see other things to read. write down your questions or your thoughts so we can discuss them. We're going to have about 15 or maybe 20 minutes to discuss, openly discuss, let you air your thoughts and so the first presenter to this evening is Joanna. Her nameplate is here, Pearson Michener, Joanna Pearson Michener, and she has a very unusual background and a lot of experience and an education and a re-education in different ways that is so admirable. So we're proud to have her as our speaker, first speaker.
Wow, I'm seeing a lot of climate advocates out there in the audience, familiar faces. I was saying to some of you that, there's going to be some choir, so to speak, here tonight, but I think that, we're all part of the choir, and the choir needs this. And some of us were reflecting before we got started that, a lot of this slowed down during the pandemic, and, well, it's high time that we get back together and start discussing this, because we need it. We need it emotionally. And that's what I'm mostly here to talk with you tonight about, is climate change and how it's affecting us emotionally and how to remain and foster psychological resilience during this time. So thank you very much, Arlo, for the kind introduction. And I know we had some silent time, but let's just take a moment and take a couple of deep breaths, because that is so good for us. It calms our parasympathetic nervous system, and it helps us be more present and come into the room with one another. Slow exhale. The slower the exhale, the more relaxing it is. Little tip. And I encourage you to take those deep breaths throughout this program and in life. It's always available to us, most of the time. So, and feel free if you need to get up and move around and stretch. And, I know there's a lot of people in the room, but sometimes it can be difficult to just kind of sit all the time, So let's begin with a land acknowledgement. A land acknowledgement, many of you are probably familiar, is a formal way to recognize the indigenous people who originally inhabited the area. So we recognize the indigenous history of the land here in Fayetteville, and that this land is unceded. The land was the ancestral homelands of the Osage and Quapaw nations who lived on and cared for it until white settlers drove them away. As Orlo stated, alluded to, I'm a climate-informed or climate-aware mental health therapist. And that simply means a mental health therapist who is aware and has had training in climate science. And this is important because without that understanding, a therapist might believe that a client is catastrophizing the issue of climate change. And that wouldn't be helpful to someone who really understands the climate science, as all of you can probably imagine. So I'm here to tell you that climate anxiety is a normal response to the threats of climate change. Plus, we're living with climate impacts. You know, many of us have already experienced severe weather events at this point where we have, feared for our lives or the lives of people that we care about or our communities. So we may know firsthand what those experiences can be like for us emotionally and what they can cause. But regardless, if we have experienced firsthand natural disasters or extreme weather events, we are all experiencing them vicariously at this point, and we're carrying that with us. Climate anxiety, eco-anxiety, and eco-grief are valid, rational responses to the climate disruption that we're experiencing, and the American Psychological Association agrees. Climate anxiety, they say, the APA, can include feelings of grief, anger, guilt, and shame, and many others, which we'll talk about here in just a second. The APA also refers to eco-anxiety specifically as a chronic fear of environmental doom, ranging from mild stress to even, clinical struggles that can lead into depression and sometimes PTSD, depending on the experiences that we've had. According to a survey from the APA, more than 2/3 of Americans now live with some level of climate anxiety, which is kind of surprising. It's like 68%, according to their survey, and that's from 2020. So mild and well-managed climate anxiety can actually be motivating to us and get us involved in collective action. However, at certain levels of severity, it can become pathological, meaning that it's impairing our functioning, or it's not allowing us to enjoy our lives anymore, which we still need to do, right? So researchers have also identified complex types of climate anxiety, and that has to do with trauma, including intergenerational effects, especially when environmental damage has disrupted ways of life and culture. So that would be examples of people living in Arctic regions, some parts of the United States, Africa, the Maldives, Marshall Islands, and more recently, Lahaina, Maui, from the extreme wildfire, and Libya and Greece just recently with the floods. How often are we hearing about these things now? It seems like it's every few days, The APA tells us, though, that paying heed to what is happening is a much healthier response than being in denial. Denial's understandable. It's a human coping mechanism, but it is, much healthier for us to be wrestling with the issue. So not only is climate anxiety, studies have shown that it's more severe for the youth, people 18 to 34, but it's also severe for people who are first responders to severe weather events, as well as climate scientists and climate activists. And those groups are exposed to a lot more firsthand information related to the issue and are working on it often, and so can actually really need more psychological support. So we're living in unprecedented times. I wanted to tell you about burnout. So, these are some words, we don't always hear so much. I mean, we see eco-grief and eco-anxiety and climate anxiety often, but, some of us, I think, have experienced depression, in our involvement in the movement, but also burnout. And, burnout is when we are mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted from long-term or prolonged stress. And we can start to feel, cynical and lose hope. That's how we know that we're feeling burnout. We just don't function well when we're in that state. But there are things that we can do to be psychologically resilient and avoid burnout. So we're going to talk about those. But we're living in unprecedented times in many ways. The severity and frequency of extreme weather events are escalating. According to a publication from Yale Environment 360, as of 2020, climate-related disasters jumped 83%. And that is comparing a time period of 1980 to 1999 compared to about the last 20 years now. So that's a lot. That's a big change. Major floods have more than doubled. The number of severe storms have risen 40%. And there have been major increases in droughts, wildfires, and heat waves. In fact, according to multiple publications, this summer of 2023 is going to be the hottest summer on record since those kind of records began in the 1880s. And not only are these extreme weather events a threat to our communities environmentally and economically, but according to biodiversity.org, continued warming is projected to commit over 1/3 of Earth's animal and plant species to extinction by 2050 if current greenhouse gas emission trajectories continue as they are currently. We are grieving the loss of multiple ways of living, ways that we used to plan for the future. We kind of plan for the future differently than we used to. Places that we loved, natural systems that we kind of took for granted, that would be there. And we're grieving the loss of felt safety. But there is hope. And we're going to talk about hope tonight. Hope in some of the social changes that are happening. There's more social support and more collective action in the new ways of living and relating to each other and the natural world. In some ways, and Orlo alluded to this, and in certain social pockets, we're actually more connected to ourselves and to each other and to our food source and to the natural world than we were for quite some time in this culture, right? I'm speaking broadly about Western culture, mostly. And philosophers like Joanna Macy and others have coined this time as the Great Turning. Culture change is happening, and there's hope in that. We're also wrestling with moral injury, and that affects us emotionally too, right? Moral injury happens when our moral and ethical expectations that are rooted in our religious, cultural, and spiritual beliefs about fairness and the value of life itself are challenged or dismantled. A lot of people who've been to war experience moral injury. But we, people who are following the climate movement and understand the stakes, we're also experiencing moral injury. And so there's issues of climate justice too, and that's what I have here on the screen right now. And these are some of the issues, that are affecting our sense of moral injury. That's why I have them there. There are multiple climate injustices, like there's vulnerable and marginalized communities that seem to be and are disproportionately impacted by climate change. There's environmental racism, where pollution from industrial processes are disproportionately located near people of color. There is global inequity, with high-income nations responsible for the majority of emissions, vastly more responsible, and yet lower-income nations are suffering the more severe consequences thus far. There are climate refugees increasing in number, migrating because of drought and floods, food insecurity, sea level rise. That's happening, which leads to conflict, and I'm talking about globally and here in the United States. And that raises questions about what is right and what do we need to do to protect people that are migrating for these reasons. There's also intersecting injustices, like gender inequality. These are kind of foundational injustices that were already in our society. Indigenous rights and LGBTQ+ rights show the need for intersectional approaches to make these situations more just for people as we're also facing climate change. And then, of course, there's the youth. And Greta Thunberg has shown us so aptly, that there is real intergenerational injustice. And so, as we become aware of these things, which we need to be, we struggle, we struggle emotionally, and that is normal. But how do we cope with our big climate feelings? This is a really cool tool that I discovered in preparing for this talk. And so, a lot of cool things are coming online now as the mental health field really begins to reckon with what's going on. And this is from the Climate Mental Health Network. And you can see here kind of 4 main areas of emotions. There's positivity, and then individual emotions. And this really helps us get in touch with the range and complexity of what we're feeling related to climate change. So let's practice this right now with each other. Let's just kind of get in touch, because one of the things that can really help us be more psychologically resilient is to identify our emotions and share them with others, and to feel validated in those emotions. And we can do that for ourselves and for each other. We can do it right now. So let's just take a moment to get in touch with an emotion about climate change. You can look there, for prompts. Just take a couple of deep breaths. It could be a feeling that you're having right now. It could just be something that you've been experiencing a lot lately. But just kind of take a moment and think about that. Now, I just invite you to turn to your partner or your neighbor, who you're sitting next to. Find someone to relate to. Just take a moment and do that. Feel free to move, look at each other, twist. It's okay. And just share a feeling. Okay, just kind of finish up, and if you haven't taken turns yet, give the other person a chance to share their feeling. Did you have a chance to validate each other? You can say, I felt that way too, or that is valid, or just a smile and a nod. Thank you all so much. Yeah. It's hard to stop, but we're going to talk about psychological resilience here in just a second. Okay. We need more time to talk to each other. Okay. Okay, so how do we know, we're living in an unprecedented, stressful time. We really are, and it's critical that we take care of ourselves and each other so that our community is resilient. We need to be psychologically resilient so our community can be more resilient. And we can help each other do that, and that's some really good news, and that's hopeful. But how do we know if we are psychologically resilient? What does psychological resilience look and feel like? Well, it looks like that we're able to sit with our emotions. We're able to get in touch with our feelings. Now, sometimes we have to suppress our feelings. So don't get me wrong. There's times when we have to just get through the day. But if we're doing that chronically and we don't have opportunities for expression, either with others who get it and who can empathize with what we're going through, or through art or music. We've got to have ways to, an outlet, So, when we're psychologically resilient, we take those opportunities, we make sure we're getting them on a regular basis, and we recognize when we need them. So another sign of psychological resilience is that we do take intentional measures to avoid overwhelm, because we know the risk of feeling overwhelmed, it's always there. It's kind of looming, right? But there's things that we can do to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves so we don't get that burnout and fatigue. We also are going to continue to find joy in and gratitude in our everyday lives. We're going to still be essentially enjoying our lives, and we need to do that. We're going to be here better for others if we can do that for ourselves and with each other. So another thing is that we're going to stay engaged in collective climate action because we care about it and it matters to us, and it gives us a sense of purpose and meaning in our lives, which humans just need that. And we can get that from a variety of different places. But what could be more purposeful and meaningful, really, than, trying to keep the planet livable? And we maintain hope. We maintain some hope, hope for the future, too. So that's kind of that's what psychological resilience looks like. That's how we can know if we're there. But how do we do it? How do we become or foster psychological resilience? Well, we need to focus on what we can control, okay? So climate change is a really complex issue, right? So that's why it's important to remind ourselves that climate change is not going to be solved by one person. It's not going to be solved by me or Donna or Sarah or Michelle or any of us individually. It's not going to be solved by an organization. It's not going to be solved by one government. And while that can seem daunting, it's also a really good reminder to us to focus on what we can control. And some of these other amazing people are going to talk about things that we can control. So I'm not going to go into that a lot, but we know it's important. You did not cause climate change. Sometimes I've caught myself, bearing it. Like the picture earlier with the man with the earth. He's just trying to walk around. But no individual caused climate change. So engaging family and friends is one that I just want to add. That Katharine Hayhoe, the famous Christian climate scientist, she always says that the most important thing that we can do as individuals to mitigate climate change and to foster resilience is to talk about it. Talk about it, which is not easy to do. It's not easy to do in our culture, but that's some hard work that we can work on trying to do, right? And it's important to remember that you're not alone. A lot of times we feel like we're the only ones maybe feeling that way. Maybe we're surrounded a lot of times by people who don't fully understand the issue. They're not as concerned about it or concerned about it at all. And we can feel lonely, So it can actually be helpful to, be intentional about spending time with people who also understand the struggle. That can be really, like tonight. Isn't this amazing? I feel it. I'm feeling good because of y'all. Thank you for being here. Engaging in collective action with other climate-concerned people has a multitude of benefits. It really does. There's actually been studies about this. They're just starting. They're kind of new. But we do know from a large body of literature that social support is one of the strongest predictors of mental health well-being, just in general, social support. Humans have to have social support to be well. So individuals who engage in collective action can have a stronger sense of self-efficacy and hope for the future. Isn't that awesome? But, too much, that last bullet is about, too much climate advocacy and activism can lead to burnout if we're not being balanced with our life choices. So, I recommend that we focus on our own unique skills and talents and abilities and, do what's most meaningful to you, where you know that you can be most effective. and, choose certain aspects of the overall climate issue to plug into, and don't feel like you need to be responsible for everything that needs to happen. Can't. Yeah. And that's okay. We're just going to all have to do this together. So I put up here this butterfly model of transformative social justice, because it just kind of gives us a loose idea of where we may fit and plug in. And you don't have to just have one niche. You can have more than one, but don't have too many. Does that make sense? So there's resistors. All of these, domains are very important in the movement to create the kind of change that we need, politically, socially, culturally. And, there's people that protest the old ways that just aren't working for us anymore. And there's reformers who teach and advocate and try to change current systems. And then there's builders, and they're the people that are creating the new ways and the new systems that we need, like Orlo. And yes, thank you, Orlo. And then there's healers, therapists, artists, musicians. We all have our part together. Let's see what's next. So we need to be kind and gentle with one another. In any painful situation where, emotions are running high, it's important that we try to be kind to ourselves. We're not going to be perfect. We're not going to be perfect all the time in our efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I don't have an EV yet. I feel like that's something I have to confess. But I drive an old clunker. Okay, so, and I'm working towards getting an EV. Okay, so we're not going to do everything perfect, and it isn't helpful to beat up on ourselves about it. It just isn't helpful. So just don't do that. But it is helpful to practice validating our feelings like we did earlier, and we can do that by saying, it's okay to feel stressed about climate change. It is. And listen to these. I can make a difference, and big changes are not all up to me. I can take a break. This issue is important to me, and so is my mental health. So take a break from climate news. We all want to stay up to date, but look, sometimes we need to take a break for our well-being. And if you're concerned you're going to miss a story or something, it's still going to be there when you're ready to come back, when you've went and had some self-care or you've had some time with your favorite tree. So you want to do things like, make sure you're making time for your friends and hobbies, enjoyment. I know it's not easy. It's hard. To make time for all these things, but it's important and it's worth doing. We'll get more out of life this way. Be with your climate community. Go to a climate cafe. Climate cafes are informal gatherings where there's usually a facilitator, and we just simply talk about our feelings related to climate change. And it's so helpful. And, Donna and I have done a couple of these, and we want to do more. We don't have one scheduled right now, but there is a place in the back where you can sign up if you're interested, and we'll be sure and let you know when we do. Is that fair? I didn't talk to her about it beforehand. So we want to spend time connecting with nature. I can't overstate the benefits of that. As an ecotherapist, I've looked into it, and we just keep learning new ways that being in the natural world is good for us, which, if you think about it, really isn't that surprising. We've just here recently really gone inside, and we stay in there too, inside too much. So we get outdoors. And it's better for our mental health. It reduces stress. It increases happiness and psychological resilience. It's good for our physical health. People who spend time outdoors tend to be more fit. It actually increases our creativity. It's good for our brain. What? I just need to go outside more and my brain will work better? Greater empathy and social bonding. Studies have shown that when we spend time with others in outdoor settings, we bond easier with each other than when we spend time with each other indoors. And environmental stewardship. When we spend time outdoors more, we're more likely to get involved in those kinds of efforts because we have a greater intimacy with the natural world. We understand what the struggles are, and there's more opportunity for getting involved in those types of efforts. And improved overall cognitive functioning. I'm up in mine this week. I started spending more time with my favorite tree. So these are just a couple of other hopeful ponderings, and I'm almost done here. But I wanted to talk with you about solastalgia, which I alluded to earlier, which is really just a deep, deep love for place. For a place that we have an emotional connection with. And there's hope in the fact that humans do this. We get attached. And when we get attached, we want to protect. And so, that kind of makes me think, yes, we need to do national and international work, but if we all work on protecting our place, then that can be really effective too. And just take a moment. Let's just kind of call out and popcorn a place that you love, that's on your heart, a heart home, or a place that concerns you about climate change. I'm going to do it. I'm going to say Sonoma County, California, because it's one of my heart homes, and I worry about that place. It's where, some of my, people that I'm biologically related to live, and there's a lot of wildfires in that area, But let's start over here and just popcorn. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but anybody that is, brave and will just, it's good for us to give voice to these things. And there's affirmation in it. Anybody brave that can call out a place? Go ahead. Isn't that the truth?
Louisiana Gulf Coast.
Oh, yes. I think hurricanes when I hear that. Yeah.
Our local farms and farmers surviving triple-digit heat.
Oh, thank you. That's right. And do you know, I'm not going to say it, but anyway, thank you for voicing that. Yeah. Maui. Yes. It's just like, it's almost like there's just not words, for what has happened in Lahaina. Yes. Wonderful. Thank you. Florida? Marvelous. Yeah. Yep. When I think of Florida, I think of sea level rise. And I have friends that live there, as many of you have friends and family there as well. Yes.
Everywhere. I can't think of a place that isn't affected by climate change.
And all the places matter to us, right? Thank you. Okay, I just wanted to share a little bit of this indigenous wisdom. This is from the book Emotional Resiliency in the Era of Climate Change by Leslie Davenport. And it's a great book. And it just says the Nuu-chah-nulth, the First Nation people of the west coast of Vancouver Island, speak of Hisuk Sawak, translated as everything is one and everything is connected. Indigenous traditions understand health as a dynamic state that requires harmonious relationships between body, mind, spirit, soul, and environment. Historically, many Native American personal health assessments have included inquiries into the patient's environmental health. Are the salmon in your river ill? And so this is a time when, I don't know if you're probably aware of this, but, Western culture is really connecting a lot more with indigenous culture and trying to work on, developing culture change and understanding the ways of really, keeping our ecosystems healthy and that sort of thing, So there's hope in that, I think. So I just wanted to share that. I think there's hope in this. I mean, this is Anthony Lasarowitz's work here, and they've been doing this now at Yale for decades, where they're really surveying the population of the United States. And you can see there that the number of people who are alarmed in the last 10 years or so, from 2012 to 2022, has really increased. And the concern group looks like it's kind of stayed the same, but really what has happened is a lot of the people who were cautious are moving on up into being concerned. And I think there's good news there, because that can lead to more political and social momentum for the changes that we need of scale. And I just thought this was kind of funny and hopeful. Fossil Free Media is a nonprofit media organization, and they've installed these public service announcement billboards calling out the fossil fuel industry and saying, brought to you by big oil. And it's heat records. Do y'all like that? A lot of hope here in Northwest Arkansas. We've got the EV from the Northwest Arkansas Council coming up. Dinah's got all kinds of amazing information about the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the biggest piece of legislation that the Congress has ever passed to address climate change. So there's a lot of hope there, and a lot of things that just really haven't even started with the Inflation Reduction Act. So, and all of y'all, of course, y'all bring me hope. And Sarah Lewis is now going to talk to us about adaptive skills and effective leadership, and I can't wait to hear it.
Well, thank you so much, Joanna. I was taking notes. Yes, like amen kind of stuff. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for physically moving yourself through space and time to come here. It shows that you do care about this topic, and you are taking action just by being here, and that's awesome. I'm Sarah Lewis. I am CEO and founder of Edgewater Coaching and Consulting. This is really my mission through Edgewater is to support sustainability-minded people in affecting the change they want to create in the world. And I come to this from a big career in sustainability across being an educator, a policymaker, and working across corporate global supply chain sustainability, and just recognizing the need to help people really intercept and get involved in actions that help them avoid the overwhelm that we feel, and help create that flow and clarity people need to take action. And so it's technically I am a sustainability leadership coach, and it is just such joy to watch people's light come on because they see the path that they can take to affect that change, to connect with their purpose and connect with the leadership that they want to create, embody. So I would like to, there I am. So leading change means connecting with what calls you. And I very specifically use this word calling because generally sustainability-minded people, professionals or otherwise, and when I say sustainability-minded people or professionals, I'm talking about every single human, just so you know. Anyone who cares about the earth and the planet and social justice and well-being and creating a beautiful place is sustainability-minded. You want to create something better, more beautiful, more just. And you have a calling for that. You know in your heart that something is not aligned. Something is not right. It doesn't fit with your values. Our society sends us messages constantly that we are wrong, that we are not right, that it is that you're a tree hugger. They use demeaning language to minimize what you're feeling. And when you begin to see that, you can't unsee it. When you begin to see those messages that are strategically sent from the system that is in place because to minimize the feelings you're having, that is strategic. That is on purpose because the system does not want to change. And so that is where leadership comes in, and it's so important to embody that leadership. So to start, I'm going to invite you to do something. If you will, write down or type or email yourself. I'm going to have you answer this question. What calls you to do the work of sustainability? What calls you to do the work of sustainability? And there could be like 100 things, but just off the top of your head, what's one thing right now that calls you to do the work of sustainability?
My grandchildren.
Fantastic. Would anyone else like to share, whether you've written it down or just reflected?
Stewardship.
Stewardship, just, yes, that the hope of stewardship, the hope of connection, which is a very important word, Julia. I'm going to focus on that for a moment. There's language that's really, really beautiful that can be used to build bridges between communities. Stewardship is a fantastic one, right? Anyone else have something that calls you to the work of sustainability?
Arkansas government shutting down solar.
So some disappointment, so feelings. So many of you may be thinking about some of the words that Joanna used and highlighting the emotions, then that calls you. You're seeing something that's happened, you're having those emotions, and it makes you want to do something. And the challenge is sometimes you don't know what that is. And so that's where we start with this, what's calling me, and taking that time to reflect on it, because that's where that rationalism comes in, that ability to be resilient. When you pause and reflect on, what is this? I don't feel good. I don't like this. I don't like that they're doing that. What is that? And reflecting on that. So I'm going to tell a story of my own calling to sustainability and some action that I took as an example of moving from being called to do something, all the emotions, into mobilizing, into doing something. And then we'll think about the types of questions that you can go through for yourself when you want to move forward, when you want to begin to move the needle. So what you're seeing here, this is a mayfly. It is the order Ephemeroptera. Some of you may be familiar with it. Who is a fly fisher, angler? We got a couple in here. This is a very important species. It is found worldwide, and different species of mayflies are found worldwide in wadable streams. They need flowing water, moving flowing water, shallow usually. They need those little rocks in the bottom of the creek, not filled with sediment. They need the rocks to be by themselves, all by themselves and open, because they get down in there, and that's where the legs lay, and then they get up and they eat the algae off of the rocks, and they decompose the leaves. And it's such an important species. When the mayfly is ready, it spends a year in the creek as an aquatic insect. The larvae lives for a whole year in the water. So it's actually more of an aquatic insect than it is when we see them flying around. Sometimes you see them in the summertime. There's these big swarms of kind of light yellow insects. Those are mayflies. And it's in a rhythm. It's in a pattern, annual cycle. And when they're ready to come out of the creek, they require a connection between the vegetation along the stream and the water. That means the leaves of the trees or the grasses have to be touching the water. And without that connection, the mayfly larvae cannot crawl out and become a nymph and become the next phase of its life. The next phase of its life is really a day. It lives a day. It has a moment to exist as part of the ecosystem where it will mate or be eaten by, how are your salmon doing? Or be eaten by the salmon or the trout or the bats or all of the other systems. It's an integral part of a broad global ecosystem that is required for so many other cycles. And without that connection between the vegetation along the stream bank and the water, the whole cycle is broken. That is what I began to learn when I became an earth science teacher. Bentonville, Arkansas, junior high, 8th graders, and I took my kids out there. I loved Ozark Streams because I grew up in Nebraska and there's only muddy ponds. So, and so I loved the streams, and I just formed a stream team, and we learned so much about the creeks, and I learned about these special bugs and their sensitivity. And so I decided to keep going and learn more about this bug, and this is me doing my field work in Clear Creek. If you know Lake Fayetteville, Clear Creek runs through there, and it runs into the Illinois River. And I set out to better understand Ozark streams and get my PhD in studying the willingness to pay. I wanted to know. I care inherently about this, but I kept observing all of the clear cutting around here, all of the mass destruction of these areas that I know are so important for this one connection to be made. And so I set out to figure out, why are people doing this? What are they willing to pay to protect it? So that was my question. What are people's willingness to pay to protect riparian zones in an Ozark watershed? I set out to do it, and come to find out, they want to pay something, an annual fee of $80 a year people are willing to pay. It's a published study. You can read it yourself. And what it tells you, too, is nobody's gone to the river. Nobody goes down to the river of Clear Creek. Nobody's fished there. Nobody visits there. Nobody peeks over the bridge, and nobody noticed it over the bridge. But guess what they still are willing to do? Pay for riparian zones along the creek because they have an existence value, it's called. They want it. They care about it. People, you all and the rest of the community around here care innately about this thing called riparian zones along the creek. It's in our blood. It's in our bodies to care about this stuff. People value it. Now, certainly other factors come into play, and whether or not they actually will pay when it comes to it, but they would pay when given the chance. So this is really important. This was a mandate for me. This said, oh my gosh, we got to do something. We're seeing all this development. We're clearing these banks. We're losing these important connections that affect global ecosystems. We got to do something. Thank you. So I ran for city council. I ran for city council and mobilized people like Dot and others to do something about this important issue. And of course, Fayetteville is a community that also inherently has that culture of caring about the environment. This was an important part of this journey, as there were other programs and initiatives happening that I was able to leverage and bring along in this vision. So now Fayetteville Natural Heritage Association, Illinois River Watershed Partnership, Omni, all of these different organizations were, Beaver Water District, the lawsuit in Oklahoma, all of that was part of this energy that I saw I could leverage to take this forward. And so we did. I didn't do it alone. The Environmental Action Committee, there's city staff. It was this beautiful, perfect storm of bringing energies into one focus, and we created the Streamside Protection Ordinance that's active today in Fayetteville. Please speak up for it every day that you can. But that's why there are trees along our streams in Fayetteville. And it's not everywhere in Northwest Arkansas. So I tell that story because it was a leadership moment for me. Those times don't come along all the time, right? You don't always have those opportunities, but those were probably a series of leadership moments. And we all have those opportunities if we're able to see them and grab them. So I want to tell you a few questions to think about. The thing that I was able to do in that situation was really connect with what calls me. I understood the science. I understood my love of those critters. The other thing is, what's the vision you're trying to create? Through that reading about this, I understood that I knew we have to create vegetated areas along the creek. I knew exactly what my vision was of what we wanted to create. Now, how it would work, I didn't know. And we figured that out along the way. The other programs or initiatives align with your vision. This is a key part of a strategy when you want to take action. Look around the system. None of this happens by ourselves. So who is kind of doing something similar where you might be able to get in that flow? It's like a river. I'm a stream ecologist. So if you look at a river, the water, there's a current, right? Who's in the current already flowing that you can get in with? And use those energies to move things forward. Lastly, what connections can you make today to begin moving that needle? Who also agrees with you? I know that if I want to do something about energy efficiency, I'm going to talk to one of these people, right? I know that they would be like, yeah, let's do it. Find those people, and who's the connection? And also, who do you feel like has other connections that could help you further mobilize? I want to recommend a book and a series of books. I brought my copy back there, but my dear friend Eric Martin and colleague, he heads up Adaptive Change Advisors. They do all kinds of development work all over the world. He would say anyone can lead change, and if you take nothing else from what I've just said, that is what I want you to remember. The idea of leadership where you have to be a CEO, or you have to be a president, or you have to be a mayor, or you have to be a manager, I don't know. It's not true. Every single human in this room can affect change. And it's about connecting with what calls you and being able to mobilize people to come with you. And he says, what makes exercising leadership worth the risk involved? We can make things better. That's why, rather than watch them slowly degrade or degenerate. While we're not guaranteed a slam dunk, we act anyway. I know a lot of you do this. From our guts and not from our heads, because we know change is possible. It gives me chills because it's so true, right? So I'm putting my contact up there. I would love to connect with you as an action, one action. That's what I am motivated. It's my mission. If you would like to talk with someone about how to get clarity on where to move your action forward, please connect with me. Thank you so much for being here. I want to highlight that Cameron is going to talk with us and give an example of some of the new language. I'm so excited about hearing about it that can be used to mobilize people. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Actually, Sarah was so inspiring, I decided that the majority of my presentation is just going to be on my answer to her question, was what calls you to this work? I mean, that's pretty meaningful. Let me make sure this is going to work. Okay, perfect. So, where are we in our conversation so far? Your feelings are valid, absolutely, right? And they're shared. You need to care for yourself as much as you need to care for the environment around you. And maybe at this point you feel drawn to lead change. But we're all doomed. So what's the point? We've already passed all the tipping points. It's already, there's already too much carbon up there. There's nothing that we can do. We hear that all the time. That's not new information, right? It's no wonder that so many people are feeling the kinds of anxiety that Dr. Michener is talking about. So I've seen that. This is Roger Hallam. He was the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion. He's no longer associated with that group because of claims that he's made like this. I'm talking about the slaughter, death, and starvation of 6 billion people this century. That's what the science predicts. That's what these kids are hearing. That's what the youth of today is hearing about their future. This is the American author Jonathan Franzen speaking in 2013. Today, the scientific evidence verges on irrefutable. If you're younger than 60, you have a good chance of witnessing the radical destabilization of life on Earth. Massive crop failures, apocalyptic fires, imploding economies, epic flooding, hundreds of millions of refugees fleeing regions made completely uninhabitable by extreme heat or persistent drought. If you are under 30, you are all but guaranteed to see it. How does that make you feel when they say that the science is telling you that this is the future you have to look forward to? Where do you find the hope to move forward in that? How it shuts you down. Absolutely. And yet we see all around us these doomist narratives, blockbuster films, famous video games, where we start to enter and fantasize about these dystopian futures, about these situations that we shouldn't want to look forward to, right? But they sell nonetheless. Now, I know that Dr. King finds his way into a lot of motivational speeches, whether he should be there or not, but I promise that he's here for a good reason, because this man wanted to lead change, and he was definitely not a doomist, right? He gathered people together, and he was well aware of the realities of racism that were all around him. And yet, he did not tell people about his nightmare. He came forward and he talked about hewing a stone of hope from the mountain of despair that stood in front of him. It was, I have a dream, right? Not listen to my nightmare. These men, these doomist men that you saw before, are dead wrong. That is not what the science tells us. They are fear-mongering. And recently, this kind of doomerism has been far more effective than denial in halting action. in getting us to stop fighting against the forces that are really causing these problems. I believe that he recognized something that was articulated very, very well by Ashley C. Ford, an incredible author. Look for her if you haven't heard of her already. The goal of oppressors is to limit your imagination about what is possible without them, so that you might never imagine more for yourself and the world that you live in. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about racist oppression or if we're talking about fossil capitalism oppression. The function is the same. Whatever the oppressors are, we have to imagine more. We must force these doomists aside, get them out of the way, so that the rest of us can do the work that we know needs to be done to reach the future that we can imagine. This is where I want to introduce my stone of hope, the fuel that feeds the fire that I feel to do this work. Cyberpunk, steampunk, you've seen these kinds of images before. They're very, very popular, but they all paint a picture of what happens with unchecked capitalism, when the darkest virtues of humanity manifest and become dominant. The counter to this is solarpunk. I hope you've heard of it. If not, I'm glad that I'm the one to introduce it, as my friend Zach Simke of the Passive House Accelerator introduced it to me. As this image illustrates, when nature, hope, and humanity are under attack, then sharing, harmony, and love are counterculture. The very act of loving is rebellion. You can see this Extinction Rebellion member is using the iconic spray cans of classic punk, only this time with malicious intent to spray live doves and plants, presumably in an area where her society feels there is no place for those things. Solarpunk began as a literary and artistic genre, but it's expanded to politics and a social movement. It's beautiful. It confirms our humanity as well as our interdependence with nature. It's also punk. It's anti-establishment. It's anti-mainstream. And the movement is rich with artwork that renews hope and reminds us of the incredible power of our ingenuity, our creativity, and our resilience. It asks us to imagine what a world would look like if we win. Instead of running what we're afraid of, what do we have to look forward to? You might remember a Chobani ad from 2021 that featured the solarpunk aesthetic, and it's actually risen to be one of the greatest examples of the genre. And I'd like to share that with you for just a moment, if you don't mind. As long as the computer wants me to. Well, it looks like it's not going to happen. So you got to see a few of the images. You get the idea of what we're looking at, is this optimistic future, this brilliant future to look forward to. And to be clear, this is not escapist fantasy. This isn't something to numb us down so that we don't look at the despair. It's Christiana Figueres, she puts it this way: optimism is not blindly ignoring the realities that surround us, because that is foolishness. It's also not a naive faith that everything is going to work out okay even if we do nothing. That is irresponsibility. The optimism that I'm speaking of is not the result of an achievement, it's the necessary input to meet that challenge. There are reasons we can look to for why we can imagine this optimistic future, pathways that are already taking us there. And the first one that I want to introduce is this Alliance Bernstein research paper. Maybe you've heard of Alliance Bernstein. They only have like maybe $779 billion that they manage as their asset management firm. These are the soberest group of accountants you can possibly imagine. And in that paper, they presented a graph that those stoic, investment-driven Wall Street paperclips entitled, "Welcome to the Terror Dome." They entitled it that way for a reason, because they had never seen anything like it before, and the power for major market disruption was glaring. We can see decades of fairly stable energy prices of fossil fuels leading down along the bottom. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this meteoric fall in the price of solar energy comes violently crashing down into the play space that was previously reserved only for those fossil fuels. Now, many scholars say that this is because solar technology, or solar energy, is a technology, it's not a fuel. Markets are used to projecting the extraction and refinement of fuels, but technology as energy is still new. And with technology, there's a learning rate. How much did you pay for your first computer? Now, how much did you pay for your most recent computer? What was the difference in performance between those two things? We learned by doing. And now, for solar, we call this learning by doing improvement Swanson's law. And it states for every doubling of our cumulative ship volume, the price of PV modules tends to drop by 20%. So for current rates, we're seeing costs drop by 75% every 10 years. This chart shows a few others. You can see the learning rate affecting the cost of offshore wind, onshore wind, coal. Again, fuel, not a technology, no learning rate there. We see nuclear energy, the learning rate is actually going the other way. It's becoming more expensive to deploy nuclear energy. And solar, again, we see a trajectory not fit for airplanes. So we can rightfully be optimistic that if solar continues along this reasonable path, that fossil fuels will become the most expensive energy source in all but the most extreme markets. And we can look forward to that, right? There is hope in this, and it is reasonable hope. Alongside, there's another technology that is really close to my heart, and that's buildings. So as solar energy can increase our supply, we also want to decrease our demand, because even as we're building, we can't reach our demands that we have now with our growing population. So by reducing demand using these 10 design principles, we can cut the energy use of our buildings by an average of 80%. Imagine that going out over every building in the country. Those incredible reductions in demand paired with solar energy increasing, or other renewables, increasing our supply. Now we have something that really gets people excited, and it is based in the science. Thank you. So the good news is that we're seeing the same kind of passive house investment in beautiful structures like these, also following this exponential growth curve that we see in solar. FIAS, the credentialing body that serves me, has shown doubling in both units and square footage every 2 years. And now this is already affecting code in New York and Massachusetts, but as it spreads elsewhere, we're going to see that continual exponential curve toward positive progress. And we're seeing this in other markets as well, that are all driving these virtuous circles, not the tipping points, not the vicious circles that we're talking about with climate change, but positive actions that are drawing fossil fuel demand destruction. And they're all gaining speed. These are tangible things we can look to for that hope that I'm talking about, that solar punk future. As I continue to search for hope and successful strategies for our climate crisis, I find that there is no end to the capacity for innovation that our species holds. I relate to the words of author and speaker Mary Heglar. The thing about climate is that you can either be overwhelmed by the problem, or you can choose to fall in love with the solutions. I'm a solar punk advocate because the only other two options that I see are denial and despair. So I choose hope. all the tech, sorry, I'm almost there, I swear. Yeah. So, all these solutions that we've been hoping for, they're already here. The boundless creativity and the indomitable will, we have that. It's here in this room. I'm looking at it. And in this existential game of chess, the end game might remain uncertain. But it doesn't mean that we can't cherish every move we have left to make. There are still days ahead of us, and we can make of them what we wish. I urge you to immerse yourself in the conditional optimism of this solar punk movement and any beacon that draws you, inspires you to action. Surround yourself with those fellow dreamers, the other ones who want to look forward to this future not just of survival, but of real thriving. This dream is not a lullaby to numb us, it's a clarion call to wake us up, to fuel our fire, to fan those flames, and to remind us that if we want to reside in this luminous future, we have to build a pathway to it right now. And I, for one, feel perfectly confident that if you all will join me on that path, there is joy and hope in front of us. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, that's a hard act to follow. All right. So I'm Michelle Halsell, and I'll just kind of tag on to what some of our other speakers have said. But basically, when I'm feeling anxious about the climate, or anything else for that matter, my first impulse is to get busy and to do something about it, right? The only thing that lowers the temperature for me is to know that I'm actually doing something to make a difference. So this is one of my favorite books. I hope you'll fall in love with this too, because it is extremely hopeful and it presents a radical, big, bold vision that we could actually reverse climate change, that it could be possible to turn the needle back and to move in a completely different direction. So, the book is on the back of the table back here. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but the book is organized by categories, and you can see these on the screen: land use, food and farming, transportation, materials, etc. In the book, there are 80 solutions. All of them have been fully researched, and then they are rank ordered from number 1 to number 80 in terms of their potential to either avoid carbon emissions or remove carbon emissions from the atmosphere. They're also ranked in terms of their cost and their global savings, right? Because most of these things do save money. So, I also want to say that I feel like looking out here, I see a lot of you. I know that you've been doing a lot of this work already. So some of these things you're going to say, check, I've checked that box, I've already done that. But maybe there will be a few surprising things in here. So let's start with my favorite topic, food. Okay, so in high-income economies like the United States, up to 35% of food is thrown out by consumers, right? That's a shame in a hungry world. The authors of this book estimate that if 50% of food waste could be reduced by 2050, the avoided emissions would be equal to 26.2 gigatons of carbon. Now, a gigaton of carbon is a billion tons of carbon. That's a lot of carbon, folks. Reducing food waste also avoids another problem, deforestation, which would prevent an additional 44 gigatons of carbon emissions. So that's a potential total of 70.6 gigatons of carbon. That's a lot. So reducing food waste is huge. In other words, clean your plates. Do what your mama said and clean your plates. Coming in at number 4 is a plant-rich diet of everything that they looked at. And I'm talking solar, wind, everything. Number 3, reduce your food waste, and number 4, a plant-rich diet, okay? So this is not only healthier for us as people, it's healthier for the climate, it's healthier for the planet. If 50% of the world's population restricted their diet to a healthy 2,500 calories per day and reduced their meat consumption overall it is estimated that 26.7 gigatons of carbon dioxide emissions could be avoided. Because meat is land intensive, right, for grazing cattle or chickens or pigs or whatever, if you add in the avoided deforestation, you would also save an additional 39.3 gigatons of carbon dioxide emissions. Okay, so your mama was right again, eat your veggies. Finally, when all of that food is thrown out, number 60, it ends up in a landfill, okay, where it decomposes and it creates methane gas, which is 26 to 34 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. So in 2015, an estimated 38% of our food waste was compost. We waste a lot of food, but then once it's wasted, we don't dispose of it properly. Only 38% of that food is composted. But in Europe, they compost 57% of their food waste. So if all low-income nations would achieve our rate of just 38%, and if all high-income nations would achieve the European rate of 57%, composting could avoid methane emissions from landfills equivalent to 2.3 gigatons of carbon dioxide. So in other words, if you don't eat it, compost it. Okay? All right. So let's move on past food. Energy use at home. I know this is old news to most of you, but number 31 is insulation, and I added sealing, air infiltration sealing, ductwork sealing. If you'll insulate your home, you reduce your energy use, you reduce your carbon emissions, and you're going to save money. Lighting. Incandescent light bulbs have been likened to little tiny space heaters. They emit a whole lot of heat and a little bitty tiny bit of light. But an LED light bulb uses a fraction of the energy, 90% less energy to emit the same amount of light. So I would encourage you to go home and do a light bulb inventory of every single room and every single fixture in your house. Find those incandescent bulbs and start replacing them with LEDs, okay? All right, now heat pumps. Let's talk about that a little bit. So most of us have furnaces, we have air conditioning systems. You're not just going to go out and replace this tomorrow, but it will break at some point in time. They have a lifespan. And when it does, consider getting a heat pump. These are far more efficient than the traditional furnaces and air conditioning units. If you powered that heat pump with renewable energy, it's generating zero emissions, carbon emissions. And we've done this. We installed a heat pump a couple of blocks down the street here. It works great. And we got a rebate from our utility company of $1,200. So they're going to help you buy that. All right, water saving, number 46. You may not realize it, but water has a carbon footprint too. It takes a ton of energy to pump water into our homes and into our buildings. It also takes a ton of energy to move that water back out and treat it at a wastewater treatment facility, okay? And then we have hot showers, and we wash our clothes in hot water, and we wash our dishes in hot water, and all of that is additional carbon emissions. So, if you do nothing else, go home and replace your toilet with a low-flow toilet, a dual flush toilet. It'll save 19% on your water usage. If you will also replace your washing machine when it breaks with a water efficient washing machine, that'll take out another 17%. If you'll add in low flow shower heads and faucets, you can achieve a total reduction of about 46% in your water usage, okay? And then wash everything in cold water, your clothes especially. And last, but well, we've got recycling cans. A can made from recycled aluminum uses 95% less energy than a can made from virgin aluminum. So please, please, please recycle. And smart thermostats, if you don't have one, you should go and get one. They're going to save you a ton of energy. It'll save you 10 to 12% on your heating, 15% on your cooling. But if we could deploy these worldwide at scale, by 2050, if 46% of homes use smart thermostats worldwide, 704 million homes would have these. And we could avoid 2.6 gigatons of carbon dioxide emissions. The return on investment is high because homeowners would save $640 billion on their utility bills by 2050. okay? So, do all of those things. If you haven't done them already, do those things. Transportation, how you get from point A to point B. This book will tell you that an electric vehicle is number 26. If you don't have one, think about it. And the Inflation Reduction Act has money available to help you to purchase one. I have an electric gas hybrid, plug-in hybrid. Last year, we bought 32 gallons of gas total for the year. So even if you can't get a fully electric car, get an electric plug-in hybrid. You will enjoy not going to the gas station. Public transportation, that's obvious. If you put people on a bus, right, that reduces congestion on our roads, it reduces our carbon emissions, it saves us a ton of money, and you get to do something else like read a book or get ready for that big presentation you have to do at work. Hybrid vehicles like Toyota Priuses, super energy efficient compared to internal combustion engines. The electric bike, if you want to have fun on the way to work or fun on the way to the grocery store, get one of these. This is the fastest selling alternative fuel vehicle in the world right now. And it is super fun to ride one of these. And most trips that people make on a daily basis are less than 6 miles. Some are shorter than 6 miles. That's easy distance on an e-bike, easy distance on an e-bike, and you will not be sweaty when you get there. Ride sharing, this is also known as carpooling, and you do it for your kids. Your kids carpool to school every day, but we need to carpool as well to work. So think about that. Solar is sexy. I don't know about you, but I have solar envy. I still don't have solar on my own house. It's on my wish list. I'm still working on it. But this is the number 10 solution in this book. Do it this year. Do it before, right, exactly. Do it before the laws change. So solar reduces carbon emissions, you know that, and if deployed widely, could reduce global emissions by 24.6 gigatons by 2050. It saves homeowners money, but it also saves utilities money because they don't need to build additional generating capacity and they don't need to build additional transmission lines. Okay, so it's not just about us, it's about saving utilities money. So when you have on-site energy generation and use, right, you've got your solar array and it's powering everything in your home or most of the things in your home, and you combine it with energy storage, in other words, a battery, all of a sudden, that old argument, hey, the sun doesn't always shine, right? Well, of course it doesn't. It goes down every night. But if you can store that solar energy at your home in a battery instead of sending it back to the grid, this enables you to have grid independence, right? You just created a little microgrid at your home. And that is totally possible these days. Orlo Stitt is living testament to that. He has achieved this, and you can achieve it too. So I would encourage you to think about this in your long-range planning for your own home and where you live. Here's the most important thing, though, and several people have alluded to this. You need to talk to your family, your friends, and your neighbors about climate change and your concerns. You need to advocate for change at the local, state, and national levels. Support your local NGOs, the Sierra Club, the Citizens Climate Lobby right here in Fayetteville, and vote. Now, I have never been one. I have often in my life chided people for being single-issue voters, whether it's guns or abortion or anything else. But we're facing an existential crisis. And now you might want to think about being a single-issue voter. And this should be your issue, right? So, make it known to candidates. We're coming into election season. Make it known to candidates that that's it for you. This is your bottom line. This is the thing, because when we fix this, right, we can solve a lot of other social problems in our communities. We can create better jobs. We can reduce inequality in incomes and so forth. So we can improve human health. So this is your main thing. So make a personal commitment and be visible about it and be vocal about it. All right, signs of hope. I'm a huge fan of communities and local government. Sarah knows this. Local governments are where the action is. They make it possible for all of us to live more sustainable lives. They build the sidewalks, they build the trails that make it possible for us to walk to work or bike to work or get to school. So you can check out these communities. Everybody knows Boulder, Colorado is like a beacon of sustainability, but so is Austin, Texas. And if you go to their website, you're going to see their greenhouse gas emissions for their whole community and their trajectory to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2040. That's a bold, audacious goal. Georgia cities and towns. Somebody mentioned Atlanta already. Lots of cities and towns in Georgia are working on this. And here in Fayetteville, we have local climate action planning too, so I would encourage you to go to the website and read this report. You'll find things in here like work with electric utilities to achieve 100% renewable energy to the community, not just to city government, to all of us, right? So you need to let your elected officials know, Mayor Jordan and everyone else on the city council, that you support this and you want to see more of it. I'm going to turn it over to Dinah Nash because Dinah Dinah is walking the talk, and she lives this in her daily life. So she's going to share a story with you about how she has achieved most of this. Thank you, Dinah. Okay. All right. Let's see. How do I get that on? There we go. Okay. First, I want to say I'm so happy that high school students are here. Would y'all stand up? Just stand up. Just stand up and wave. Woo! Look at this. Woo! Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank your teacher for mentioning this. I'm so happy the rest of you are here too, but we just really wanted to get to a few young people too. So, are y'all taking notes? Y'all writing a paper? Okay, good. All right. I'm an old high school teacher, so I get this. All right. So what's a carbon footprint? Who knows what that is exactly? Okay, say it.
It's how much the way you live uses carbon.
Yeah.
Creates the CO2 emissions.
That's right. So how can we figure out, what our carbon footprint is?
Go online.
Yep, that's right. I'll show you the website in a minute. But what I'd like y'all to think about as you leave here is how can I reduce my carbon footprint 10% a year? I guess infinitely, you would be down to zero carbon. Not sure how you do that, but I'm trying to think about it, and my husband and I have a solar system I'll tell you about in a minute. So I'm going to refer you to the handout, the third page in your handout, okay? It's a double-sided thing. And the first is your pledge to reduce your carbon emissions by 10% or more a year. Take a look at that, and I would love it if some of y'all could see, it goes from 1 to 11, from travel changes to investing. And just pick one and pop out an example, if you don't mind, for the rest of us to hear, of what you think you might be able to change to reduce your carbon footprint. Get an EV? Oh, yeah, I've got $42,000 sitting around. This brings up another interesting thing that's happened in the last couple of weeks. Yeah, that was a Kia. That was a Kia price. A Tesla is more like, what, 70, what? Anyway, I want to introduce you to somebody in the audience who's working on trying to make used cars out of EVs out of used cars. Actually, it's the wife of Kevin. Kevin, can you raise your hand? Okay, Kevin's an architect here in town, Kevin Cooper. And his wife
was here, but she had to go pack for a trip to California tomorrow morning. Valerie Cooper's trying to work with a fella in the mechanical engineering department to create EVs out of used cars, which might make it affordable for the rest of us. So that's a hopeful thing, I think. So what can you think of this from this list? What can you think of that you might be able to reduce in your life in the way of carbon stuff? Okay.
One of the things I've been trying to do is reduce my purchase of single-use plastic.
Okay.
And I've gone to laundry detergent sheets, they come in cardboard boxes.
Uh-huh.
And I've gone to shampoo bars, they're like bars of soap, but they're shampoo, and it's
Ooh.
great. And
Yeah.
you don't buy all of these shampoo bottles.
Okay. Yeah, good.
I also realized that getting my body armor electrolyte replacement was single-use plastic, and I found some good powdered replacements that have the electrolytes and vitamins and everything in them.
Thank
So
you. That's
just
great.
figuring out ways to stop using single-use plastic.
That's exactly the kind of thing I hope you'll all start thinking about. Any other person want to pop up with a good example? Okay, good.
I live far out of town, and
Yeah.
I try to plan better as I make a trip into town to get several things done for the week and
Beautiful,
just
yeah.
cut down that drive.
Yeah, cut down all the little errands. Okay, good. So this is a photo of the subdivision in which my husband and I live. And the red marker, the little dot, is our house. And we decided to put solar on our house. And I kind of want to tell you about that process. So the home we live in is just a subdivision house, just a plain old subdivision house, not a custom-built house with giant amounts of thought put into energy saving. But nevertheless, again, the red dot is our house. You'll see trees behind it. That was a decision we made before we bought a house. We'd be near a lot of green. And I also wanted our roof to face south. So we managed that. So in 10 years, our solar system costs $18,500, but we're paying it in little tiny bite-sized pieces. We're paying $54 a month. Now, most people, unless you're a student, could afford that. To think about paying that off. Now that will take us now 19 years. We've had it for a year, so it would either take 20 years at that rate or 10 years at the rate of $108. That completely replaces our utility bill. So in 10 years, we own the system for a 40-plus year period. So after 10 years, it's free electricity, basically. So that is so cool to think about, and it's clean energy. Something happened to, there we go. So this is our solar system. It's 15 panels, 5.2 kilowatts. And you don't have to do a thing to it. In fact, leave it alone. Really easy. Yeah. These are our bills, our typical electric bills. You'll see under, starting in August, our paperless bill for that month was $30.53. That was our electric bill. The next one, the same. The next one was $18.44. The next one was minus $12.09, and so on down the list to minus 148, minus 173, minus 197, minus 162. So these are credits that we are building up to. So you average this over the whole year, and you get basically a zero electric bill. How many square feet? It's 2640. Yeah. The bottom line? Okay. Well, I don't think you mean, you mean, $940 is credit. So we're making more than we can use. And Orlo says, get a battery or get an electric car and plug it in and use those credits, because we're not going to get paid for those. They won't pay you more than just your bill, but you can use it. Okay. So, I just want to briefly recognize Valerie Cooper, and she has left some pamphlets on the back table. And I wanted to also introduce David Renfro, who's part of our group. David, take a bow. David is a retired mechanical engineering professor and has been an expert witness. Done? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Please take this worksheet, and on the back is ways to be politically involved. I hope you'll read that. Thank you.
They're going to close our doors in 15 minutes, so we're going to try to wrap it up and still have a few minutes for questions.
How large is the battery that you would need in your house if you had a solar system?
That's a pretty extended question. Maybe we're short of time. They're going to kick us out of here in a few minutes. But the batteries are very effective, much less expensive, and 30% tax credits for everything. As was mentioned, the Inflation Reduction Act gives us that benefit. The environmental biology professor, we were talking about what inspired you, motivated me. He was in environmental biology, and this is 1963. And he was also a professor or a PhD in chemistry. And he said, look, if you take how much carbon we are burning in coal and natural gas and propane and everything else, and you triple it in weight. So 110 train cars that go into a single day into a coal-fired generation plant. That is like 3 train cars, and it turns into tons. And then he says, we can't taste it, we can't smell it, we can't package it, we can't haul it, we can't charge for garbage pickup. It's going to have an effect on our climate. This was when Rachel Carson just had written her book, if some of you are familiar, Silent Spring. That turned me toward sustainability. That's almost 63 years ago. Wow. We got a lot of challenges, we got a lot to do. Tony Seba, who some of you may know, said, I saw a picture of Times Square with thousands of horse and buggies, and 10 years later, I only saw 1 horse and buggy. Somebody had built the cars, had built service stations, made tires, all the things that happened in 10 years, there were all cars and only 1 horse and buggy. Isn't that amazing? There is hope. Since then, I and my wife and our children began what I now call holistically green living. Green is a common word that is accepted worldwide as sustainability. And it's important. It's the only real communication that is clearly understood. It is a concept of what we have been talking about here today. We've been talking, yes, to the choir, but I say to each of you, as in a religion, we're all disciples. Not necessarily religious disciples, we're sustainability and clean energy disciples. We need to go out and tell the world. And if you each tell 20 or 10 or so many people, pretty soon it'll be contagious in a positive way. Holistically green living is a lifestyle. I have the book, it's in the back, there's a display copy. It's 18 principles related to building your own energy efficient, even net zero or net zero plus. And the plus I'm talking about is that you can charge your car like Dinah could charge her car because she has leftover sunshine. If you put in a system that's getting less and less, and we have the tax credits, all of a sudden, it's a way of living. But it's also something that comes from commitment. First chapter in my book is about commitment, the first chapter. Now, we think one person, okay, I'm going to commit. But what if you commit and somehow because your boss or your work associate or your friends or your neighbors or your church members, they become understanding of what it takes to commit to save energy and save the planet. It's contagious. But individuals is what runs this world. It's not board of directors or it's not machinery. It's one person at a time making a commitment. And not only making that commitment, but doing something about it. I love some of the things that the different people said here, that it's up to you to be happy, and it's up to you to do something about it, and that creates happiness when you feel, and I can say without any hesitation that that is my life. By the way, the book is being sold. You can QR code, click on it, and order it. We're not selling them here. But all of that revenue that we're getting from books goes to extend climate change education. We have future educational events coming up. The American Solar Energy Society a national tour of homes is coming up in October. There's a virtual tour available now. We will have 4 homes and then also have a in-person tour of homes on October 7th and 8th. You'll see houses, including my wife Mary, who's in the back, our house. You can tour it through. We'll show you a video of it, which is part of the virtual tour. Tells you all about the features, heat pumps and passive solar and all the things. Our bills are net zero. We charge 2 plug-in cars. We don't buy gas. We drive past gas stations. I just drove to and from Boulder and stopped 9 times to charge my Tesla. And there's less maintenance, and you'll find it's an incredible investment. And what a dream to drive. It is really a computer on wheels, and that scares some people, but it's pretty friendly and easy to adapt to. We'll have special educational sessions. We have a lady who was from Florida. She is now the president of the Appraisal Institute, and she goes around the country as part of her work, giving lectures on clean energy and the value of it and how you pay for it and all the things that these people here, appraisers, bankers, builders, architects, all need to somehow do. An educational dream that I have, and I'm about to close on this, is that every student, we have great students here, but every student in a college or in a trade school or whatever, junior college, have at least one course required to graduate in sustainability. What an important thing for students to have. I don't care if they know math or write a essay without errors. They need to know about sustainability. In your flyers, in your flyers, you have a sheet on the solar tour and the open house, under construction open house, so you can see actually inside the tubies and whatever, and see how the roof and what we call an ice house roof, which cuts 64% on summer cooling, just because you built the roof right. And here's the final thing, which Michelle and everybody in some way was talking about. I like the way Michelle put it in gigatons. Wow. But here's a list of all the things that you can do, even starting tonight or tomorrow, to save energy. And 10%, like Dinah said, 10%, 10%, 10%, pretty soon you got 100%, maybe you have 125%. And now you're sharing your efficiency offsets, we might call it. So to close, who's going to do the poem?
Okay, this is the last, can you hear me? This is the last thing, and then we're going to wrap it up. This is a poem by Wendell Berry, The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Thank you all for being here.
We actually overspoke. Our sessions each turned out to be 2 or 3 or 4 minutes longer. We have to be out of the library at 8, but please come to the events that follow.